we're ready for the last lecture, Finance 350. I've enjoyed teaching the class, hope you guys have learned something. Obviously, you still have more time to learn something because even though this is the last lecture, we have another month or so that you can reach out. And you know, some of you might want to reach out beyond that. Let's get going today. I want to thank you all for coming again. It's been a joy to teach the class. Would have liked it all in person, but you know, we're making do with what we can. Chapter 11, Capital Budgeting. This is the chapter that trips people up most of the time on the final exam. So please do the problems, the practice problems, the homework problems. Pay attention today. Well, you can only have pay attention if you want, because you know you can go back and replay this. But please, at some point, get the idea of what we're teaching. All right, capital budgeting. Okay, methods are now produced. Okay, we've got 5 of them. Net present value, internal rate of return, modified internal rate of return, which is an improvement on internal rate of return, payback method, and the discounted payback method, which is a variation of the payback method. We're going to learn the pros and cons of each one. We're going to learn how to use each one, how to do the math related to each one of these capital budgeting techniques to help you make decisions along capital budgeting lines. Capital budgeting, 5 to 10 year horizon usually. Sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but the idea is we're using these methods to decide whether we should make some major investment ideas generally. They can also be used for smaller projects. We'll see that, okay? All right. One of the things that I'd like to point out, net present value, when you have the information available, that is the best method to use. That will give you the most correct answer. Okay, net present value looks at the cash flows in the future that you're expecting to earn from the project. Stuff that we've been working with all term, figuring out cash flows. We look at the cash flows expected, and we create a present value from those streams and compare it to today's investment. So if we're going to invest $1 million and we expect cash flows in the future amounting to, let's say, $130,000 a year for the next 10 years, we discount that back at the weighted average cost of capital. So we can't forget about weighted average cost of capital. Okay. We're going to use that weighted average cost of capital to discount the cash flows associated with the investment, and then when we discount them, we'll come up with a value. The value is higher than the investment, then we make the investment. Again, assuming only financial considerations. Sometimes those non-financial considerations enter into the picture, and we still may not want to do the deal. But net present value will use weighted average cost of capital. Net present value is the best method to use. Okay? Net present value can be used to evaluate mutually exclusive or independent projects. All right? So we need to make sure we understand what mutually exclusive and independent projects are. I like to use Starbucks as an example. Here in Naperville, we have Starbucks at Main Street and Jefferson. We have Starbucks on Chicago Avenue over by Bar Louie. Well, Bar Louie's not there anymore, so it's by Five Guys. Okay? So we've got a Starbucks there, We have a Starbucks up on Ogden and Washington Boulevard. We have another Starbucks over by Ogden and Iroquois Avenue. We've got 4 Starbucks within walking distance of this school. So let's suggest that someone at Starbucks thought it would be a good idea to open up another Starbucks right here on the corner of Benton and Brainerd. Some of you might like that idea because you're Starbucks fans. Okay? Some of the neighbors might like that idea because they would like a Starbucks right in their neighborhood. Closer. Let's consider that whole area in their neighborhood, but they want it even closer. Okay? This valuation to determine whether you should open up that Starbucks on Benton and Brainerd is mutually exclusive. What do we mean there? We mean if you open up that one there and you want to evaluate what its cash flows will be, you're going to guesstimate how many customers it's going to have over time. And you're going to figure out how much each of those customers will purchase, so you're getting a total revenue picture from each one. You're going to look at the expenses of opening up that store. So you'll have the revenues less the expenses, you have a net profit, you'll discount those back at weighted average cost of capital, compare it to the amount you invest. If it's positive, which is the key in net present value, you'll consider opening it. However, we got one other issue. When those people start going to the Starbucks, the new one at Benton and Brainerd, are they new customers to Starbucks? In other words, did they used to always go to the Boiler House? Did they always go to Dunkin' Donuts or Pete's? And now they're coming to Starbucks? Or did they just not buy coffee before, and now since it's right down the block, they're visiting Starbucks? Or are some of the customers at this new Starbucks coming from one of the 4 existing Starbucks in the area? This is the things you have to understand. You have to understand, is the project mutually exclusive or independent? It's if there is a drain on the businesses, the surrounding Starbucks, then your numbers might not be right. You have to reduce those estimates of revenue for the revenue you're losing from the other 4 stores. So it makes the project a little bit more difficult to evaluate. You have to figure out how many customers who would have went to Jefferson in Maine are now in your store. So you're not gaining new revenue. So what you're looking for is incremental revenue, okay? Change in revenue, all right, when it's mutually exclusive. And I have to worry about that in our problems that we're gonna do. In our problems that we're gonna do, we'll give you some cash flows that will make all the assumptions and you'll discount them, okay? Independent, let's explain independent. We could use Walmart, all right? There's a Walmart on 75th Street near Route 59 in Naperville. If Walmart is considering opening another Walmart in Peoria, it's independent. If the closest Walmart to Peoria happens to be the Naperville one, or one in Rockford, or Champaign, then it doesn't matter. When they open that Walmart store, people from Naperville aren't driving out to Peoria. People from Rockford aren't driving to Peoria. People from Champaign aren't. That would be an independent project. So you evaluate it just in its own bubble. What are the new revenues, less expenses for that one Walmart? Okay, that's an independent project. It's not going to cannibalize sales from competing Walmarts, okay? So understand the difference between mutual and independent projects. Mutual projects cannibalize revenue, profitability from existing stores. Independent projects do not impact negatively existing stores in your firm, okay? So now that we understand that, we said net present value method can be used in either type of these projects. Net present value method discounts the cash flows at weighted average cost of capital, compares the answer to the present value. If it's positive, you can do the project. Couple other considerations. One is your budget. How much do you have to spend? Okay? You have to make sure, if you're, let's say you're evaluating 3 independent projects and you have $2 million to spend. If each project requires a $1 million investment, and all 3 come up positive, so you would like to invest them at all, but your budget is $2 million, you can't invest in 3 $1 million projects. You can only invest in 2 because your budget limits you to your investment. So in that case, you pick the two projects that generate the greatest net present value. Both of them would have to be over 0 though. Net present value, okay, has to be a positive number. If all three were positive, you're limited to the 2 because your budget limits you to 2, okay? The other thing, if you evaluated the 3 projects and all of them were negative, you don't invest in the best one that's the least negative. Negative's no good, okay? You only invest them if they're positive. So you're limited to your budget, and one of them has to be positive, net present value, okay? All right, let's move on to internal rate of return. Internal rate of return, you'll be using your calculator to calculate yield again, okay? So you should be used to doing this one, okay? So internal rate of return, we're going to solve for IY in the calculator. Internal rate of return, it's got a very specific definition that I like to use. It is the rate of return that equates your future cash flows to the investment. In other words, what interest rate, when you discount future cash flows, will make the investment worth exactly 0? Now, why do we do that? If we find the interest rate that says if you discount the future cash flows by this interest rate, the present value of those discounted cash flows will exactly equal the investment, then we can compare the internal rate of return to our weighted average cost of capital. So if the internal rate of return of a project is 5%, but our weighted average cost of capital is 9%, don't do the project. This project only has an internal rate of return generating 5%. Our weighted average cost of capital is 9. If, however, the internal rate of return is 11% and our weighted average cost of capital is 9, then the project should be accepted. Why? Because the internal rate of return is greater than weighted average cost of capital, okay? That's the consideration there. You're looking to see, is the internal rate of return greater than weighted average cost of capital? If it is, then you can accept it. You have the same problem, mutually exclusive or independent, and you're also limited to your budget again. You will only be able to invest in those projects that exceed the weighted average cost of capital up to the amount of the budget that you have to spend on investment projects, okay? If you have 3 that qualify, and you can only afford 2, you pick the 2 with the highest internal rate of return. There's 2 problems with internal rate of return that you need to know. First of all, when we were discounting this, the answer that we're getting on our calculator is that internal rate of return which equates the future cash flows to the current investment, okay? Which means it makes a faulty presumption that all the cash flows that you're going to get in the future will be reinvested at that internal rate of return. That is a faulty presumption. Because you buy a machine at a factory to create some product, and you find out that that internal rate of return is 11%. That means each year it's going to generate an 11% net profit to you, basically, all right? And you're going to take those funds that you receive and you're going to invest them in other projects. The other projects that you invest in won't also earn the same exact internal rate of return that this project was calculated to earn based on internal rate of return. Instead, what we should realize is all future funds generated from any project that we accept must be invested at greater than weighted average cost of capital. Hence, one of the big flaws in internal rate of return is it presumes all future cash flows from any project you invested are going to return to the person entering the investment the same internal rate of return. No, that's false you will take those funds and invest them in a variety of other projects that all have internal rate of returns greater than weighted average cost of capital, not the exact internal rate of return of the project you happen to invest in today. Okay? The second problem with internal rate of return is it can actually, based on the cash flows when they vacillate from positive to negative, okay? So you might have a project where you're gonna lose a lot of money the first couple of years, then you'll make a lot of money in a few years, and then the last year you might lose money. So we went from negative returns to positive returns to negative returns on a cash flow basis. When you would do the math for that, you will end up with two internal rate of returns. Which one's right? Well, that's the problem. If you have all the information, use net present value. It will only give you one answer. It's going to either be a positive or a negative. If it's positive, go with it. Internal rate of return, when cash flows vacillate from positive to negative, you will get multiple internal rate of returns. So we say, well, give me an example of a project that has vacillating cash flows. If you've watched the show Gold Rush on the Discovery Channel, okay, when you go up to Yukon to mine for gold, you spend a whole bunch of money the first year acquiring land, purchasing machinery, hiring people, doing testing of ground, clearing trees, digging a hole. You might spend 2 years doing that. All you've had are expenses. You've had negative cash flow. Year 3, 4, 5, 6, you're mining for gold. So you have your operational expenses, but if you're finding gold, you pay your expenses, and you got profits in those middle years. So cash flows went from negative the first 2 years while you did all the investing to positive in the future years. And then finally you've got the last bit of gold out of the land, and regulations require you to fill the hole back up, plant new trees, and move the heck back out of the Yukon. That last year, probably negative. So you've gone from negative to positive for a few years to negative. When you plug those cash flows in, you will end up getting two internal rate of returns. That's a problem, okay? So to correct for that, we end up with the modified internal rate of return. Some of this will make more sense. We'll go through a couple of problems in a few minutes. Modified internal rate of return. The modified internal rate of return corrects for the first issue, okay? It actually corrects for both issues, but it's specifically the first issue of, do you invest your money that you receive from one project to earn exactly the same internal rate of return in other projects? Modified internal rate of return will use weighted average cost of capital to create a future value of all cash flows and then discount them back at WACC, weighted average cost of capital. That will solve the problem of both the double returns and the improper presumption that all cash flows are earning the internal rate of return. Number 4 is the payback method. Payback method basically says you've got $300 in your pocket. You go buy a machine for the $300. Okay? It generates $100 in profit for you every year. In 3 years, you were paid back. That's what the payback method is. Okay? How many years do I get my money back? It doesn't worry about, maybe this project will go on and will produce $100 for the next 50 years. This is one of the issues with the payback method. It doesn't look at total profitability. It's looking at how quick do I get paid back. All right? I invest $250. It's going to generate $100 a year again. At the end of year 1, I got 100. I put it in my pocket. I'm still short 150. And in the second year, I earn another $100, but I'm short $50 after 2 years. So how much do I need of the third year? I need 50 of the 100 that I'm going to earn in the third year, so I'm paid back in 2.5 years. It's that simple. For some reason, that concept is always troubling. I don't know why. How much money did you invest? How long will it take to get back? In terms of years. Okay? Why do we use the payback method? Well, first of all, we said there's an issue with it. There's an issue with it because it doesn't consider the total profitability. We might be getting money back for 50 years. When do we decide if we should accept a project under the payback method? Okay, good question. We should accept the project under the payback method when the payback time period adheres to management's guidelines. What do I mean? Say you're General Motors. We do not want the CEO, the CFO, and other executives way up in the C-suite to be worrying about if we're going to buy a $20,000 machine at General Motors to improve productivity. We want them to figure out what's the target structure. Should we be issuing bonds? Should we do a merger? Should we sell the company? Who's our external auditor? Should we pay a dividend? Should we repurchase shares? We want them working on those big picture ideas. Should we quit selling sedans and go to trucks? Should we open up international operations? We want them spending their time and their decision making on high level, big ticket decisions. So they empower management at lower levels, and they empower them in a very easy way sometimes. Okay? They might tell the supervisor, you can invest in any project that has a budget or investment of, let's pick 50 grand. And you could do 3 projects per year, which gives you $150,000 that you can invest in 3 different machines that you think would help efficiency. The guideline is any project that you invest, you have to be paid back in less than 4 years. This is very easy for the supervisor at the General Motors plant to understand. If they invest 50 grand because they read in an engineering magazine that there's a new machine that would speed up the process, so they buy the machine for 50 grand, will it pay them back in 4 years? So if it's going to generate $13,000 of profit each year, 13,000 times 4 years is 52 grand. So if they invested 50 grand and they get 52 grand back within 4 years, they're going to actually get it back in a little less than 4 years. How many years? Well, after 3 years, they get 39,000. 3 years of 13,000, and in the 4th year, they only need 11,000 more to get paid back. So they need 3 years plus 11,000 over 13,000. Which is about 0.85. So the payback period is 3.85 years. Since management said you can invest up to 50 grand as long as you're paid back in under 4 years, they can buy this machine. What are we doing here? We're empowering our supervisors. We're empowering the line people. We're teaching them how to make some really simple decisions to improve profitability. Maybe we tie their bonus to this. Every project that you do that succeeds, you might get a certain percentage bonus of the profitability. Maybe the line workers get a bonus too when they come up with new ideas like this. You're empowering and you're training your lower level supervisors to become upper level managers with the payback method, okay? Payback method and discounted payback method, we'll see, both help you understand the liquidity and riskiness of the projects in terms of how long till you get paid back. What's the liquidity of this $50,000 investment? We'll get our money back in less than 4 years. Had this project only generated $10,000 a year, they would have needed 5 years to get paid back. they don't do the project. This project, in terms of payback, is riskier than management's guideline of 4 years. So payback and discounted payback, which we'll talk about in a minute, both give you an insight into the risk and liquidity of a project. How risky is it in terms of how long to get your money back? Liquidity in terms of how long to get your money back. Both of those give you an insight into liquidity and risk, okay, in terms of management's guidelines, okay? Now, we already said the payback method does not consider the cash flows in the future. So you don't get the true value of all the benefits from the cash flows into the future once you get paid back. Discounted payback also does not give you an insight into the total profitability of the project into the future years. It has the same drawback. But it does do one thing that this method doesn't do. It uses weighted average cost of capital. So in our environment now where interest rates are so close to zero, this one's not as useful. But if your weighted average cost of capital is some bigger number, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 12%, all of a sudden you'll start noticing differences. Okay, because now in that one project that we just showed, where management said you have 4 years to get your money back, and it made $13,000 a year, so we got paid back in 3.85 years. 13,000 times 3 was 39. We were short 11 grand to get the 50. So we need 11 of the 13,000 in the 4th year. That's 0.85 years, 3.85 years for the payback method. Okay? But we presume no cost of financing. In the real world, there is a cost of financing. So discounted payback method corrects for that. Okay? Discounted payback method says we should figure in the cost of financing. So now what do? We have to discount those $13,000 cash flows using weighted average cost of capital. And instead, maybe now when we discount them, the value of those cash flows doesn't get us paid back in under 4 years. The discounted payback method will extend the payback period. It will be greater than the payback period. Okay? Because you have to account for the cost of financing. You don't do it here. This is a better method in terms of true financial results. It still doesn't give you total financial results because you don't worry about years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You only worry up to the guideline. Okay? I think it'll be best at this point to get ready to pull up a worksheet here. You guys should have a copy in front of you from the learning module section of Blackboard, and you could maybe follow along. Okay? So what type of projects, again, do we use these methods for? We use them for the replacement of equipment. We use them to expand existing product lines. We use them to consider mergers and acquisitions. Okay? We use them, should we buy a new building? Should we pave a parking lot? All kinds of different capital budgeting projects that we use these 5 for. Okay? Don't forget what mutually exclusive and independent are. And let's fire up the overhead for one last time this semester. I guess I should dim the lights. Don't fall asleep on me. This practice set, we are considering spending $40,000 on an investment. We're buying a machine. we are given the weighted average cost of capital is 15%. In chapter 10, you have to calculate it. Back to chapter 11, I'll give you the weighted average cost of capital. The investment now is 40 grand, the weighted average cost of capital is 15%. We're told you're gonna get $12,000 annually every year. That's the cash flow you're gonna get every year once you invest 40 grand. First question is, how long is the regular payback period? Well, if we're getting 12 grand back, we know at the end of 3 years, we've gotten 36,000 back, 12 times 3. Did we receive the entire 40 grand? No, we're short 4,000. So we need 4,000 of the 4th year's payment of 12 grand. 4 over 12 is a third. So we need 3 1/3 years to get paid back. Would we do this project if the payback period guideline was 4 years or under? We would accept this project. If it was 3 years or under, we wouldn't. Let's presume it was 4 years, we would accept this project. Simply take a look at the investment. First 3 years, we've earned 36 grand back. We're short 4 grand. 4 grand over 12 grand is a third, so we need a third of the money we get back in the 4th year. 3 1/3 years is your payback period answer. Next, let's do the discounted payback period. We already said the discounted payback period will extend the answer in terms of years. It will take you longer to get paid back because you have to cover the cost of financing. So here we have to do some discounting. We invested 40 grand, we're getting 12 grand per year. 12 grand divided by 1 plus the weighted average cost of capital raised to how many years out on our timeline. Okay, so this is our investment today. This is year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. So 12 grand divided by 1.15 to the first power, that's itself. 12 grand divided by 1.15 is 10,435. 12 grand divided by 1.15 to the second power, 9074. When you're discounting, divide. And so on. 12 grand divided by 1.15. Remember, 0.15 was given the weighted average cost of capital, 1 plus WACC, 7,890. 12 grand divided by 1.15 to the 4th and 1.15 to the 5th. We now start looking how long till we get paid back. All right? After 4 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, those streams add up to 34,260. These 4 equal 34,260. We are $5,740 short. We need $5,740 of the 5,966, which is 0.96 years. We don't get paid back until 4.96 years. Without figuring cost of financing, we were getting paid back in 3.3 years. So here you have to realize, if management guideline was 4, under the payback method, we would have accepted it. Under the discount payback, we wouldn't accept it because the cost of financing is too onerous. It extends the length of time till we're paid back to beyond management's guideline of 4 years. Note, important thing, payback, we just took 4 grand over to 12 grand cash flow. Discounted payback, we actually use the discounted amount. So we're short 5,740 divided by the discounted amount of the next year. That's how we got the 0.96. Do not do 5,740 over the 12 grand like you did in the discounted method. Under the regular payback. Under regular payback, you use the 12 grand. Under the discounted one, the 5,740 is over the 5,966. If it was a 4-year, you wouldn't do it. If it was a 5-year, then you would. Questions, send them in. D here. What is the internal rate of return for the above project? Okay, future value is 0. Our present value is the negative 40,000. Our payment is 12 grand. If management's guideline was 4, we'll use the 4. Okay? That gives us 7.71. That's our internal rate of return. Do we do the project? No, because WACC, weighted average cost of capital, was 15%. This project only returns a 7.71% internal rate of return. Since it is not greater than weighted average cost of capital, based on the internal rate of return method, we would not accept this project. Okay? It's that simple. You've been doing this calculation since chapter 5. You just need to put it in a different framework. The present value is the amount of your investment. Your payment are the cash flows. The term is the guideline, and you get an internal rate of return. Compare it to weighted average cost of capital. If it's less, don't do the project. Someone might ask, well, it was good under the payback method, or was it good in an internal rate of return? Should you do the project? It depends. Are you mandated to have an internal rate of return greater than WACC? Then you wouldn't do it. If you were just a supervisor, you would have done this project, okay? In the payback method. You wouldn't have done it under the discounted payback method. All right? So it depends on what your guideline is, whether you do the project. Simply on an internal rate of return or discounted payback method, you wouldn't. Under the payback method, so far you would have. Now we want to look at the best method. What is the net present value of the project? Okay. What is the net present value? Okay. Assuming n is 4. Again, future value, oh, I gotta shrink this a little. What is the net present value of the project if n is 4? Future value is 0. The payment is 12 grand. N is 4. Now we use the WACC as our interest rate. We calculate the present value, $34,260. Should it be accepted? No. Why? Because the net present value is less than 0. That net present value is the 34,260 that we just calculated, and we have to subtract the 40,000 investment. That gives us a negative 5740. The same number that we got using the discounted payback method. Since the investment is greater than the present value, remember when you're punching this into the calculator, you're getting the present value. You have to compare it to the investment. This is the present value to get net present value. This is another mistake people make. Understand that discounting the cash flows gives you the present value. Subtract the investment to get the net present value. If it's negative, do not invest. Okay? We've done these before. If the payment stream is varied, you will have to do like we did with a varied stream before. You would discount each of the payments just like we did in the discounted payback method. All right? That's the net present value method. Final, we'll do the MIRR. We're going to calculate the future value this time using weighted average cost of capital. So we have our stream 0, 1, 2, 3, 12 grand coming in 4 years in a row. We then know, since we're calculating future value, the future value, remember, of a payment that we get at the end is worth itself. $12,000 that we receive in year 3 will grow at the weighted average cost of capital, 1.15. So we multiply the 12 grand by 1.15. This one gets 2 years, okay, that we could use the money to invest in other projects at WAC. So this 12 grand is multiplied by 1.15 to the second power, and this one is 1.15 to the third power. 12 grand times 1.15 to the third power, because it gets 3 years, turns into 18,250. Add these 4 numbers up, we get 59,920 as a future value. Once we have that, present value of the investment is 40 grand, negative. The future value, we just calculated, 59,220. This is important right here. The payment becomes 0 because we converted all these payments to a future value. So when you're using modified internal rate of return, the payment will always be 0 because you converted them by multiplying to get a future value. N is 4, we solve for the modified internal rate of return. It's 10.63. Less than WAC, decline the project. Okay? Just to get some extra practice, we will redo this. Same $12,000 annual cash flow. All right, except we're going to change WAC to 6%. What you should realize first off, the payback method won't change because it doesn't use weighted average cost of capital. So it stays at 3.3 years. Regardless of what the weighted average cost of capital is, payback method doesn't change. So you don't have to do any work. We already know what it is. 3 years of 12 grand is 36. I'm 4 grand short. 4 over 12,000 is 0.33, 3.33 years. Now, since we lowered the WAC, we should have lowered the time for the discounted payback method. Let's see what happens. 40 grand investment in year 0. 1, 2, 3, 4 was the guideline. We divide, when we discount, we divide. 12 grand divided by 1.06 gives us 11,321. 1.06 to the second power, 10,680. Divide the 12 grand by 1.06 to the third. Divide 1.06 to the fourth into the 12 grand. These equal 41,581. That's more than our investment. We're getting paid back more than we invested under the guidelines of 4 years. So this project's going to be a go. But to find out exactly how many years the payback is, it took till the 4th year because we have to go and add the first 3 years up. The first 3 years add up to 32,076. We're short 79.24. The 4th year on the discounted method, we get back 95.05. So we take the 79.24 divided by 95.05, not the 12 grand, the 95.05. That's 0.83 years. Hence, we're paid back in 3.83 years. Now, because interest rates have dramatically come down, we can accept this project. Now, maybe you can relate this to Federal Reserve policy, driving interest rates down. It will mean more companies can choose more projects to do. More projects will be acceptable when interest rates are lower. That's why the economy is hoped to stimulate more business when rates go down, because it will allow more projects to be accepted. Okay? That's the second of the discounted payback. Next, internal rate of return. Guess what? Internal rate of return doesn't change. Why? Because internal rate of return only looks at WACC at the end to decide, is the internal rate of return you calculated higher or lower, do we accept it? So nothing has changed with internal rate of return. $40,000 investment, 4 years, with a $12,000 cash flow, okay, gives us a 7 point future value of 0. Everything's the same, okay, except we can now accept this project. Because interest rates are so much lower, our internal rate of return is greater than 6%. Since WACC is so much lower, this project is now acceptable also under weighted average cost of capital. So I'm trying to demonstrate what happens when we lower interest rates in the economy. We create more opportunity, more jobs, okay? For net present value, we can again put in the future payment as 0. Future value is 0. The payment is 12 grand. The interest rate now is not 15. We dropped it to 6. So if N is 4, 41,581 is the present value of all the payments you received during the 4 years. Since 41,581 is greater than the investment, you have a positive number, 1,581, except the project. If you forgot how to discount things, look right up here. This shows you how to do it in case the cash flows were uneven. Then you would have to actually go through a discounting process of each one to calculate the net present value, to calculate the present value, then subtract it from the investment to get your NPV. This is the NPV. This is the present value of the cash flows. If you have any questions, please send them in. Finally, one last look at modified internal rate of return. Remember, we do the modified internal rate of return because the internal rate of return had 2 issues. When cash flow slipped from positive to negative and back, it created 2 different internal rate of returns. Which one's right? The second problem, it assumes all the cash flows earned in the project will always be reinvested at the same internal rate of return. That's false. You will take all money earned from previous projects and invest them in any project, weighted average cost of capital or higher. So hence we come up with modified internal rate of return. And this is your 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 is the guideline. We're calculating a future value. So we're multiplying. Divide is discount, future value, multiply, okay? 12 grand is worth itself. 12 grand times 1.06 now. Because that's the new weighted average cost of capital. 1 plus the weighted average cost of capital is 1.06. 12 grand times 1.06 is 12,720. This 12 grand, you get the reinvestment projects for 2 years. 12 grand times 1.06 squared. 12 grand times 1.06 cubed. Add them up, you get a future value of 52,495. If that's your future value, your payments have turned into 0 because you used them all to get this. Remember, payment is 0. This is a common mistake. You do all this work and then you tell me the payment is 12 grand. You'll get some ridiculous number that doesn't make any sense. All right, next, present value is still a 40 grand investment. Your modified internal rate of return is just over 7%. 6% was the weighted average cost of capital. You do this project now. So we can see lowering interest rates makes this project doable. That's why we look for Federal Reserve to lower interest rates when things are going bad to get things going again. All right? Think of your money in banking class. All right. With that, there is one more problem. I gave you the answers. You can do those on your own. Make sure you can get the answers that were given. Then you'll know you kind of understand this. Then go and do the homework problems. After you've done the homework problems, the text has problems. You have the answers to those on Blackboard. Go ahead and try those. Assuming you're comfortable, congratulations on doing a great job on your test. All right? If you're uncomfortable, get questions to me. Hopefully you didn't wait to watch this video on the date that it expires. Watch it ahead of time. Take some notes. Do the practice problems. All this stuff's on. I sent you this. I emailed you this file. The answers to the text problems are on Blackboard. Homeworks have been on Blackboard. Again, glad to teach you guys. Any questions, stay in touch. Give me a holler. I'm going to be meeting with some school training staff. Maybe I can get into Blackboard, collaborate, and we can do a discussion at some point. We'll see how that works. I'll keep you updated. Meanwhile, you have all the resources you need to be successful in chapters 9, 10, and 11. 3 videos, practice examples, my notes. The notes were updated on Blackboard on March 15th for you for chapters 9, 10, and 11. So if you printed them out early, print out a new set. They're updated because I add a few things just because I try to anticipate questions you might have. With that, have a great day. Thank you.